Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to the September meeting of the Council of the City and County of Swansea. First item on our agenda this evening is apologies for absence. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Mandy Evans, Patrick Williams, Miles Langston, Clive Lloyd, Jen Runner, Mark Thomas, Will Thomas and Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Okay, are there any others? No, hand gone up, Andrea.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Councillor Gloria Tanner did make me aware earlier that she was having connection issues, so she may not be able to join the meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. No one else indicating. On to item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. You've all had the circular from the monitoring officer. Tracy, do you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. Just in relation to agenda item 9, which is the statement of accounts, from page 120 to 121, there are a number of outside bodies mentioned, in particular the National Waterfront Museum, Wales National Pool Port Health Authority and the Fire Authority. I will take a block declaration if you have been appointed to any of those bodies. For a personal interest only, if you've been appointed by the authority, it will not be prejudicial. So block declaration, so all please raise your virtual hands for a personal interest only in relation to agenda item 9, the statement of accounts. And please remember to fill in the form.
Okay, going up there, thank you.
Good.
Just taking a note.
Keep
them up, because there's a huge number of you, so please keep them up. I think that's everybody.
But just to remind you to make sure you do complete the form.
Okay, does anyone else have any interest they need to declare? Sorry, we've still got...
Yeah, they take them down.
Right, hands are disappearing from the last. Right. Does anyone else have anything, any matter they need to declare? No. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Mark Child.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I need to declare personal and prejudicial interest in the question. I think it's question 3. Apologies, on social services. I'm grateful the leader will be taking that question but I'll leave the meeting for that.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. So Hennigan, put your hand up.
Yes. It's item 9. If you haven't just done it, did you just do item 9?
Yes, good interest, yes.
Fire Authority and member of the Fire Authority. And I will fill the form in accordingly. All right, Chair?
Des is muted and I can't hear what he's saying.
Okay, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, are you happy with those as a correct record?
Move.
Yes, moved, seconded. Thank you. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council. There are none. And then item 5 is the announcements of the presiding member. I have 1 or 2 announcements. Quite pleasant this time. First of all, the Association for Public Service Excellence 2021 Awards. the APSI Awards recognise the very best in local government frontline services across the UK. The winners will be announced at the APSI Annual Charity Awards dinner in aid of Parkinson's UK on the 9th of September. I'm delighted to announce that Swansea Council has been shortlisted as overall Council of the Year and also in a further 3 categories in the APSI Awards. They've been nominated as the Best Service Team for Housing and Construction Initiative under the More Homes Delivery Team, Building Services and Housing. They've also been nominated as the Best Housing Regeneration or New Build Initiative under the More Homes Swansea Standard, Homes as Power Stations Developments, and again that's Housing and Building Services. And thirdly, the Best Commercialisation and Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is the Commercial Development Focus and the Commercial Services. So keep our fingers crossed that they bring back the awards. And then the Welsh Housing Awards for 2021 recognise and celebrate the creativity, the passion and innovation of housing organisations and individuals across the sector in Wales. The winners will be announced on the 30th of September. And I'm delighted to announce that Swansea Council has been shortlisted in 2 categories in the Welsh Housing Awards 2021. First is in the Partnership Working category, and that's in respect of T. Tom Jones. And the other is the Innovation in Housing category, the Swansea Council in partnership with Welsh School of Architecture. Okay. The Council has also nominated organisations for awards, but the Council is not leading these projects. One is Supporting Communities category, which is the Swansea Together Food Project, and also the Excellence in Health and Wellbeing category, the Swansea Specialist Homelessness Nurse for that award. So the Council has nominated those. So again, we wish those the best of luck. And now on to the Paralympics. I'm sure most of you have seen some of the Paralympics taking place, and they're really force to be reckoned with when you can see how people with disabilities are achieving what they do. So I'd like to send the Council congratulations to Paul Karabarak of Ranoli on his recent bronze medal at the Paralympics in the para table tennis. And Paul has previously won a number of European medals following hard work and perseverance. I noticed today that Paul is also in the finals of the doubles. So hopefully, there'll be another award there. Absolutely amazing. You know, I tried to play table tennis. When you see some of these people, the ability. I watched a young lad play violin, the bat in his mouth the other day. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Elliot King on being included in the Pink List for 2021. And the Pink List refers to Wales' most influential LGBT plus people. The Pink List recognises Wales' most influential LGBT plus people, and I'm delighted that Councillor Elliot King, the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, and he's the chair of the Swansea LGBT plus Forum and lead on Swansea Pride, and Elliot is on that list. So well done, Elliot. Congratulations from all your friends and colleagues on the Council. That concludes my announcements. Item 6 on our agenda is the announcement to the leader. Councillor Rob Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I'd obviously like to associate myself with your congratulations and obviously be very, very pleased with the recognition that the Council has received again this year in terms of the nominations. Again, people will remember we were nominated for Council of the Year a couple of years ago, and we do hope that this time we'll bring home that trophy. It'll be an interesting battle because obviously our neighbours in NPT are also up for that award this year, but it's good to see 2 councils in South Wales vying for that very, very prestigious award. Moving on to my announcements, Chair. Obviously, people will have seen the terrible scenes in Kabul recently as the UK and other forces withdrew from Afghanistan. Obviously, the outcome of that has meant a humanitarian crisis and the need for us to once again step up to support those fleeing persecution and support refugees who need to come to the UK, some of whom, of course, will be British nationals who had to leave everything behind as they fled the country. Swansea, as a city of sanctuary, takes its responsibilities very seriously, and we've led some of the discussions with the WLGA in Wales and have been in close contact with the Home Office to ensure that we stand ready to receive not just the families we'd previously agreed to assist as part of the original scheme, but also those additional refugees. I'm very pleased with the work that's been done by officers as well as Cabinet members Alison Pugh and Andrew Lewis in terms of helping both the refugees settle in and to coordinate efforts, the very many offers of support and help that we've received from communities across Swansea, which again speaks volumes about how the people of Swansea are prepared to respond to the needs of those fleeing persecution. We will continue to do all we can and play our part alongside other councils in Wales to look after those refugees that are fleeing persecution. So again, Chair, just wanted to place that on record and give members an update. I believe 2 families have already arrived in Swansea and we're expecting further families in due course. In terms of COVID, people will have seen recently that the infection rates have once again risen, as have the positivity rates, and that Swansea Bay, which covers Swansea and the Talbot areas, remain some of the highest areas for infection in Wales. Whilst we must remain cautious in terms of the levels of infections, and our test and trace teams are doing an excellent effort in terms of tracking people who have become positive. Many of those infections this time appear to be related to festivals, primarily the Broadmasters Festival that took place recently in Cornwall. But obviously we remain vigilant in terms of the younger age groups who have been attending those festivals and have then returned with a positive condition. In terms of those becoming positive with COVID, they are very much in the under 25 age groups at the present time, which shows just how effective the vaccine has been in terms of ensuring not only those, the majority of our population try and avoid becoming positive, but also when they do then pick up the infection, because that is still something people can do even though they're double jabbed or vaccinated. That weakened link between the potential for people getting the virus to then become seriously ill or go into hospital and needing treatment has reduced the number significantly needing to go into hospital. Now, whilst there are pressures, of course, on the NHS across Wales, it is very pleasing to see that given the high levels of infection, the actual numbers of admissions to hospital and the length of stays and the need for treatment whilst they are in hospital is reduced significantly at this point in time. Very different from what we saw during the second and first waves of the pandemic. And I think that's, again, a tribute to the work done by those administering the vaccine and obviously the work done by our excellent NHS. My final announcement this evening, Chair, is just to announce to members that following the successful bus promotion that we ran during the summer holidays, which was very, very popular, we saw some increase in bus usage up by 60% in some areas and some routes as people took advantage of that fantastic offer, which could have saved a family of 4 over £50 per weekend if they took full use of those offers. We intend, subject to approval via the necessary recovery fund process, to repeat that offer during the both half-term and Christmas periods. The offer will obviously be amended for those periods to reflect the different priorities that people may have for travelling, and obviously people will primarily want to go, I would suspect, to more so to our shopping areas and to the city centre during the colder months rather than to the beaches. But we will be talking to bid to traders and others to make sure that the offer in the autumn season matches the needs of businesses. So again, very pleased to be able to announce that our intention is to recommence that offer for the forthcoming holiday periods. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Holly, Chris.
Yeah, can I associate ourselves with the comments made by the leader about Kabul and the refugees? You know, at the end of the day, we are a city of sanctuary, as he has said, and I think it's incredibly important that we actually have a united front and say that we welcome these people who are likely to have been persecuted in their own country, and I look forward to seeing them. And can I congratulate him on the bus promotion, which has been excellent. But it would be, wouldn't it? As you know, flattery is a wonderful thing.
Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Thanks. I'd like to say, to share the leaders' thoughts about Afghanistan, because I think it's really important that we look after those families who have had to flee the country. And it's great news that they're coming to Swansea. And I know a lot of people have contacted me, and I passed a number on to Alison Pugh, Councillor Alison Pugh, offering help and support.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those words. Okay. Next item is item 7, public questions.
There aren't.
There aren't any, no one's indicated they wish to ask any public questions, so we move on to item 8, which is the report of the Audit Wales, Audit of Accounts Report, City County of Swansea, and I understand we should have Jason Garcia online to give the report. Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Presiding Member. You should have in your pack the Audit of Accounts report for the City of County of Swansea for 2021. If I can turn you over to the contents page, which has the overall heading of the report. Unfortunately, this year we reached a conclusion where we intend to issue a qualified audit report on your accounts, and there are some issues to report to you prior to their approval. I'll go through the report in detail, and obviously there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask questions at the end if you don't mind. If I can then take you over the page to paragraph 4 is the first one I'd like to highlight. Each year we do an audit of the accounts. We set what's called a materiality level. And this is the level of acceptable error that we are prepared to accept. Before such, we would change our audit opinion. So for the current year, we set this level at 9.3 million, and it's generally based on the level of expenditure in your financial statements. Going on then to paragraph 5, there's a couple of areas within the accounts that we believe that the materiality level wouldn't be appropriate for, that the amounts involved in these disclosures are generally lower, but they're very politically sensitive. So we've identified 2 areas, being senior officers' remuneration and related parties for members and senior officers, where we've applied a lower materiality level. So if I can then just take you on to sort of paragraph 7, this report went to your Audit and Governance Committee last week, and there was several items still outstanding at that point in time. It's been updated for this meeting today, but there was still some work that was still ongoing. I can confirm that the 2 bullet points that are in that paragraph have now both been dealt with, and there's no further issues that I need to bring to your attention at this point in time in relation to either of those. Going on then to paragraph 8, every year you have to put your accounts on inspection for members of the public to have an opportunity to look at items of account and potentially raise questions or objections with us should they see that to be the right course of action. That date for this year was the 9th of August. We have had some items of correspondence which we've responded to and dealt with so far. We're hoping that between now and when we have the audit of the accounts signed off next week, that there won't be any further items of correspondence, but members of the public do have that right to get in touch with us right up until the point the audit certificate is provided. So hopefully nothing will come up in these next few days, and we can proceed on the 7th of September to have the audit opinion signed. So if I can then turn you over the page, the next section sort of talks about the impact of COVID-19 on this year's audit. And ultimately, I'd just like to put on record our thanks for the support and flexibility of council officers, particularly Mr. Ben Smith and the finance team, in relation to it's a new way of working for us all. I've been working at home now for the last 18 months. I haven't been into the civic centre, into my office there in that entire time. So working in this way is a challenge for us all, but we've adapted. We're working in this way far better than we were at the start of this process. And that Exhibit 1 does talk about the impact on this year's audit and how we've adapted that process, going through the audit period over the last few months. So then if I can take you on then to paragraph 13, this is where we talk about the proposed audit opinion. As I mentioned, we are planning on issuing a qualified audit opinion. This is because, as outlined in paragraph 15, we've come to the conclusion that two unusable reserves, being the revaluation reserve and the capital adjustment account, are, in our view, materially incorrect. Now, this is a very much a historic issue that has been increasing over the numbers of years. But you can see in that paragraph the scale of these two reserves. One of them is 369 million and the other is 712 million. The qualification is very much a technical one in relation to how you account, for the funding of your fixed assets, and ultimately your accounts need to comply, with obviously the CIPFA code of practice as outlined in paragraph 17. So there is whilst we've come to the conclusion the totality of these two reserves is correct, we are of the view that the split is incorrect and dates back to at least 2011-12. Now, there is a chunk of work to be done that will need to be done over the coming months to trace back the revaluations that have gone through on specific assets, to work out the potential error. But in the time we've had available to sign off the audit, that we haven't been able to quantify the scale of the error, although we are of the view that it is above our materiality level of 9.3 million. I think I'd like to highlight two points we've sort of included in bold in paragraph 20 and paragraph 21. First of all, unusable reserves are what's called not resource backed and cannot be used for any other purpose. This is not that these are earmarked reserves or funding that has disappeared or anything. These are purely technical accounting reserves that ultimately has resulted in this issue. And as I've already said, we're saying that any adjustment to one will have a corresponding adjustment in the other. So overall, the totality of the two, as we say in paragraph 21, is correct. Our proposed audit report, the detail of that, which is in your final set of accounts, which you've got in front of you today, is in Appendix 2. I won't go into any detail on that, but ultimately it'll have the exact wording that will be signed by the Auditor General next week. If I can then take you on to paragraph 24, the audit report we've included also has what's called an emphasis of matter paragraph. This is as a result of the valuation report that your valuer did this year, whereby they came to the conclusion that for surplus city centre assets and investment property assets, that they weren't confident in the valuations based on the impact of COVID-19 on those particular assets as at the 31st of March 2021. Now, all an emphasis of matter paragraph in an audit opinion is purely drawing the attention to the reader of the accounts to the relevant notes where this is disclosed. And this is disclosed in notes 14 and 16 of your financial statements. This is not in any way a qualified audit opinion. It is just purely drawing the attention of the reader to those particular notes. So if I can then come on to paragraph 26, during the audit, we have to quantify any what we call uncorrected misstatements. These have to be above what's called our trivial level, which is basically 5% of our materiality level. In the year, we did identify one misstatement, and it related to a donated personal protective equipment. This is where the council received a large amount of PPE equipment, which it has distributed to its own departments as well as other organisations. We've identified that the value of the PPE received during the year amounted to £2 million, just over £2 million, and the amount that should have been accounted for as a donated inventory, as in the amount that was issued to council departments, was 895,000, as outlined in paragraph 28, and the remaining 1.1 million issued to third-party organisations, which wouldn't need to go into your statement of accounts. So basically, the council decided that in view that of the amounts involved, in view that it's a notional transaction, as in you would have to increase both your income and your expenditure accordingly in relation to the fact that you had these items free of charge, the council took a decision to actually not correct this error in the final statements that are in front of you today. I'll come on to the section in Appendix 3 about the corrected misstatements in a second, but if I can then just take you on to Exhibit 2. The first one in Exhibit 2 talks about the qualification in relation to the 2 unusable reserves. The second row in Exhibit 2 talks about the material uncertainty. And basically, the third part just highlights our proposed audit report in Appendix 2. Now, during this particular year, we have picked up that the council has historic local bonds valued at £5,000. Now, normally for an amount of that, we wouldn't look at it in any way, shape or form. However, due to change in government regulations, this actually now classes Swansea Council as a public interest entity. And this then falls under the remit of an organisation called the Financial Reporting Council. And as such, as a public interest entity, we have to have additional reporting requirements, and our audit report does include these additional reporting requirements. So as I've said, we took this report to the Audit and Governance Committee last week. It's coming to yourselves today. Following receipt of this report, obviously I'll take any questions, but then I'll be looking for the council to approve the financial statements. And then once those statements are approved, basically I would be looking for a signed set of financial statements to be provided to us, as well as a signed letter of representation over the next couple of days. And the aim is to take those then to the Auditor General on the 7th of September to have the audit opinion signed. So if I can just go on a little bit further, just some information then around going concern in paragraph, hold on a second, paragraph 39, that we can confirm that we're happy that the accounts have been prepared on the basis of Swansea Council being a going concern, and that the responsible financial officer has not disclosed in the financial statements any identified material uncertainties that may cast significant doubt of the council or group's ability to adopt this going concern basis for the next 12 months from the date the accounts are authorised for issue. We then confirm in paragraph 40, with the exception of the items I've already brought to your attention, there are no significant deficiencies in the council or group's internal financial control system or in the accounting system, and that there's no significant matters around laws and regulations that I need to bring to your attention. Then if I can take you over then to the appendices. So the first appendix is the template letter of representation I was referring to. So we will need this prepared and signed following this meeting and provided to us in order to provide the audit opinion on the statement of accounts. Then if we go into Appendix 2, this is the actual wording of the audit opinion. So if I can just take you down to the section or just above the basis for the qualified audit opinion heading. This is the change in the wording. What you'd have received from us in previous years would have been a statement which says, in my opinion, the financial statements, and then those 2 bullet points, give a true and fair view and have been properly prepared. What you've got this year, which is the qualification part of it, is we say, in my opinion, except for the possible effects of the matter described in the basis for the qualified opinion section of our report, the financial statements give a true and fair view. And in that basis for the qualified audit opinion, you've got the narrative around the 2 reserves I talked about. And that is what we're saying is the accounts, with the exception of those 2 reserves, do give a true and fair view, in our opinion. And then a little bit lower down, you've got the wording of our emphasis of matter, a paragraph, which is the bit I said about drawing attention to notes 14 and 16 of the financial statements. And then finally, then going on to Exhibit let me just, the key audit matters part. This is just a summary of all the risks we presented to you in our audit plan earlier in the year, and then our response during the year as to what we've done and what we've found in mitigating those risks. And I won't go into any detail because there's nothing particularly needing to be brought to your attention, but generally that's bringing forward the risks we thought were in place when we put our plan together. And then the last appendix, then, if I can take you on to Appendix 3, in there is basically just one fairly significant adjustment in relation to grant income, whereby there was an amount that was accounted for, which shouldn't have been because it was an agency arrangement, but ultimately this was a disclosure requirement and had no impact on your council's comprehensive income and expenditure account. And then you've got the various presentational amendments which we'd have in any audit. So that was quite a quick run through of the report. Obviously, I'm sure it's not what you would have wanted, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jason. For Mr. Ben Smith, Section 151 officer, please. Ben.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, as Mr. Garcia has said, it is a disappointing matter, but I am pleased that he has openly acknowledged that it's a technical matter and has no overall impact on the accounts. I will speak more in due course when I present the statement of accounts to you. I would equally acknowledge the free and open dialogue between myself and Mr. Garcia as the representative of the Auditor General. I respect the Auditor General's opinion. He has to form an opinion overall. I do, having respected it, wonder whether it adds any particular value to the reader's understanding of what are technical matters. But in terms of the strict interpretation of the SIPFA code, my auditor colleagues have no option but to draw your attention to that matter, and I will speak in more in due course when, as I say, I present the accounts. A disappointing outcome, but I would set it in the context of we have had the craziest year ever in terms of COVID, and we've managed to keep everything going, plus about 200 million quid on top. So I think Mr. Garcia has rightly emphasised those sort of nil impact on the technical matter of the qualification, and the other adjustments are sorts of items that you would expect to ordinarily see. And again, Mr. Garcia has rightly assured you that they all have no overall impact. Some of the annoying ones, like the agency stuff, is just symptomatic of the sheer pace and scale of which we've had to set up nearly £200 million worth of flex spending. So they are to be expected, and you will probably all recall that there was a similar material uncertainty clause in last year's accounts with COVID. No one really knows what some of the assets are worth. So as I say, I reserve most of my comments to my taking you very briefly through the statement of accounts in due course. I have taken the liberty of drafting the letter of representation, and if you are so minded to receive the auditor's report as is, and also to pass a resolution agreeing the letter of representation, it is my intention, presiding member, that you and me will electronically sign that and submit that after council has considered the other matters on the agenda today. I think that's all I need to draw attention to in terms of officer advice to members. It can be a bit scary, but I think, to be fair to Mr. Garcia, he has made quite clear that these are technical matters, and I will add some further explanation myself when we come to it in the next item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Now, I mean, everyone understands, Ben, don't you? The next bit is for technical questions. Okay, we'll come on to the political stuff if there is any later. But Councillor David Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow on from Mr. Smith's comment about adding to this particular reader's understanding. It's a question to Mr. Garcia. If you could explain, please, we've got a qualified report only on the basis of the way that the unusable reserves described on page 14 have been used. But the quantum of these two reserves together is correct, and it's merely the way that they have been divided between those two that has led to the material difference that's led to the qualified report. Given that most people outside, and if it was accurately reported by the Evening Post, would say that Swansea Council has had a qualified audit report. Somebody would have to go into the detail of this and wouldn't have the benefit of your explanation or Mr. Smith's as to why this was purely a technical matter. Don't you think, given that those things which don't make any difference, because if one is wrong, any correction would go into the other account and the overall figure would stay exactly the same? do you not think that giving a qualified report in those circumstances, whilst it may be technically correct, actually gives the wrong impression of the way Swansea Council has managed its accounts?
I think what I would come back to on that is two things, really. One, as I've presented, I've tried to put as much context into the situation as I can, as Ben sort of alluded to when he sort of came back. But secondly, we have to comply with the code requirements on ourselves that are set by SIPFA. And these are significantly material reserves, which in our view are materially inaccurate this year. So as Mr. Smith alluded to, our hands were tied, in that respect, but to sort of mitigate it somewhat, we've tried to put as much context in relation to how we've explained it in our document and to how we've explained it to your audit committee, how I've tried to explain it today, and so that's what I would come back up to on that one.
So in other words, Mr. Garcia, for the benefit of people, members of the public listening into this debate, there's nothing actually fundamentally wrong with the council's accounting of the money. It's purely a technicality about the way this money's been actually put in the books.
I wouldn't use the term money with it, because these are not cash-backed reserves.
So it's the way that stuff that's not even money has been improperly accounted for.
It's the way a technical adjustment related to how your assets are accounted for has resulted in incorrect amounts going into one reserve in comparison to the other. So these are not, and this is what I said, these are not cash-backed reserves. It is not as if your bank balance is £10 million wrong or anything of that nature. But under the SIPFA code, you are required to disclose these reserves, and we are required then to undertake an audit to check that those reserves are accurate, within the material levels we set.
So this is money that doesn't fundamentally exist.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
Sorry, but this is money that fundamentally doesn't exist.
But you've received it. Councillor Chris Holly.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Mr. Garcia, for the report. Can you clear up the Exhibit 2, the second paragraph, material uncertainty in relation to the surplus city centre and investment property assets? I've gone back and looked at your notes in 14 and 16. I'd passed comment before that local government finance is a black art, but you've taken it to a different level with this report with respect. I think you should be in charge of Hogwarts, because in all honesty, I have no idea what that means. I know I'm not an accountant, but generally speaking, you should be, I know you've got to abide by a code, but it should also be a bit of common sense and a bit something that the public can understand. There's nothing, I can't understand that, and I'm pretty sure many of the public don't. And I don't know how many members understand it, but I wonder if you could explain what that actually means.
If I can firstly say, if you're looking at paragraphs 14 and 16 of our report, thinking that Exhibit 2 is linking to them, it's not. That Exhibit 2 is linking to Notes 14 and Note 16 of the Statement of Accounts that Ben will talk through in a little while. So then there's no link between paragraph 14 and paragraph 16 of that report and Exhibit 2. The 14 and 16 relate to your financial statements. And basically what this is about is each year you have an internal asset valuer who does a program of work to revalue assets, different assets in different years.
Yes.
When they have done this work this year, at the end of the year, they produce a report for the council. And this year, they included, based on their technical advice they have had, a material uncertainty clause in their report, saying because of COVID-19, we aren't as confident in the values that we have come up with for surplus city centre assets and investment properties as we would normally be prior to COVID-19. Now, all we are doing is basically, because that they're using the word material uncertainty. There are those figures, so say they've valued an investment property at 100 million. They're saying they're not as confident as it was. They could be materially wrong. So what we are doing is purely and simply adding that paragraph to our audit opinion to draw the reader of the accounts attention to those notes in the accounts where your valuer, because we rely upon the work of your valuer when it comes to asset valuations. I'm not a valuer. We check the qualifications of your valuer, that they're appropriately following process and whatever, and following their professional standards. But ultimately, I rely upon their work in that regard. They have said they're not as confident about the figures relating to those assets. All we are doing is drawing the attention of that to yourselves and any readers of the accounts by including that emphasis on matter paragraph in our audit opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rob, Leader, are you going to ask a technical question, or do you want to continue the political aspect? Because I've got another.
No, I'll come in at the end if that's okay, Chair. I just got a few comments to make, if that's okay.
Councillor Philpott.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, I hope I'm going to bring this down to lay person's terms. For most of the people out in the city and county of Swansea, I can understand what Councillor Phillips has said and the questions have been asked. But when loans are raised, it's generally against assets. And if there is an uncertainty again on the value of those assets, any loans raised might have some sort of issue. And I think that for the people of the city and county of Swansea, they would just want to know that there's enough asset there against the loans that have been raised possibly on those assets. And I'm not sure, Mr. Garcia, whether that's a question for you or for Mr. Smith, but I've tried to bring the question in just to bring it on that material basis, what it means to this to residents. And I don't know if I've complicated it or simplified it, but that's my contribution to try and help.
Thanks. Thank you.
Presiding member, if I may come in, because I can probably answer Councillor Philpott's, but also just come back in on the discussion that was just had. And to echo what Mr. Garcia has said, it is my decision to disclose that material uncertainty clause because I'm professionally obliged to rely on my valuer's views. It sort of comes back to some of the nonsense, which is what is the value of the assets in the balance sheet? The reality is they're only worth what someone will buy them off you if you actually came to sell them. At any point in between, it is an entirely moot point. And rightly, our valuer has said with COVID, there is uncertainty. So it's perfectly reasonable to expect that to be in there. Of course, if they were materially uncertain and changed by 20 or 30 million pounds, the irony is that the fixed asset, the revaluation reserve, or possibly the capital adjustment reserves, would have been the ones that would be tweaked for the material change the other way. In terms of Councillor Philpott's question, it is an interesting one, albeit slightly odd, again, because local authority accounts are really weird. They're not really like private sector accounts. SIP, for my professional body, tries to make them look like it. But we don't really raise loans against the value of the assets because we borrow significantly from the PWLB. What we choose to spend the loan money on is almost irrelevant because with our ability to access PWLB, which is itself referenced to UK government gilts, is the fact that all repayments are secured on future taxpayers of Swansea. So Councillor Philpott is right in terms of raising the matter in terms as a matter of interest, but it's an unusual one in that in reality, not all of the assets are dependent on borrowing because many of them are grant financed or donated and such matters. You've heard Mr. Garcia refer to the PPE, which is current asset donations rather than fixed asset donations, but certainly it's an unusual arrangement in terms of the loan borrowing. I can only borrow from the PWLB because I'm able to levy unlimited sums as necessary on future taxpayers. So I think the point Councillor Philpott made is a valid one, and it's that which is when we have great debates in this council about the overall affordability of the capital programme, the capital equalisation reserve, and all of those really boring technical reports around the Treasury management policy and all of the borrowing reserves that are delegated, borrowing powers that are delegated to me to exercise on your behalf. So I think it's probably easier for me to attempt to answer that rather than Mr. Garcia. And thank you, Presiding Member, for calling me in.
No, nobody else other than the leader. Okay, leader, please, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, again, I'm not going to extend it. I think we've had a good debate on it. I mean, firstly, I'd just thank Mr. Garcia for the report. Obviously, Mr. Garcia, as an auditor, has to do the job that he's there to do, and that is to pick up on technical issues. But I think, as others have demonstrated in their questioning, and Mr. Smith has said, you know, and I think the example Mr. Smith gave to the audit committee when they looked at this was that really what Mr. Garcia is saying, you've got two pots which you can't touch, which are completely beyond use. And we're arguing about what the value of each of those is and whether it's split the right way. So it's really not a material issue. I just want to focus on the really important stuff, which I'm sure Mr. Smith will come on to shortly, which is you know, Ben's team has again done a fantastic job. They have focused on the important stuff, and the accounts, as Mr. Garcia referred to, are robust in all of the other matters. And you know, if they were at odds in some of the more important stuff, then obviously Mr. Garcia would be making those points. Again, as Mr. Smith will come on to, you know, we were in a very, very unique situation, huge variances in the budget last year, which again, Mr. Smith and his team managed very, very adeptly, getting out millions of pounds through the council to businesses and others to support them through the pandemic, ensuring that we did things like build a hospital for the NHS, that we were able to finance that until we could get that money back from the NHS, and managed all of the many huge variances in the budget last year, and got us to a point where we were able to submit the accounts early in the year, which again is a real accolade and a real achievement. So I think we should be paying tribute to the work that's being done, albeit with some technicalities, which again, as Mr. Garcia said, you know, this isn't something that cropped up this year. This inaccuracy has been there for over 10 years. But this year is the year in which it's become a material of note. So again, I just think we should focus on the important stuff here. £50 million surplus, which I'm sure Mr. Smith will say more about when we come to the next item. But I wanted to thank both Mr. Garcia and Mr. Smith and their team for the work that's been done.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Garcia, you want to get back?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. First of all, thank you, Leader, for your comments. I'd just like to come back on Councillor Philpott's comment, really, just to say one other thing. You know, bringing it back, I suppose, to the finance and the layperson side of this, you may be far more interested in the report that also went to the Governance and Audit Committee last week, you know, which is a report we did on the Council's financial sustainability assessment. That actually very much talks about cash and money and reserves and things of that, and is a far more, you know, I would say, positive report. So if you haven't had the opportunity to see that, I think that would really give you some assurance over some of the comments and questions that you just had.
That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, there is no one else indicating they wish to ask questions. And there is a vote required now, okay? And the recommendation is that the financial statement is approved and the final letter of representation be approved and signed. Mr. Evans?
Right, the vote has been launched. It should be on your screens in a few moments. Just think how you want to vote for, against, or abstain. I'll give it a couple of moments. If the vote doesn't appear on your screen, please raise your virtual hand and I will come to you and take a verbal vote. Okay, they're still coming in. Is anybody unable to vote? Can anybody not see the virtual? Councillor Fiona Gordon.
Yeah, I can't see the vote, sorry, but I'm in for.
You vote for, okay. Anybody else? Councillor Gordon Walker? How do you vote? Walker? No? Okay, and Councillor Irene Mann I saw as well.
I couldn't see the vote, but I vote for.
Okay, I'll just
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker again? No? No vote? Councillor Walker?
Raise your hand. You're muted, Gordon.
Four.
Thank you.
Okay. So anybody else unable to vote remotely? No. So I've had everybody, yeah?
Sullivan, Gareth, are you indicating?
Yeah, I would vote for.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, give me a moment till I close the poll. Okay, and that's unanimous vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 9 on the agenda is the Statement of Accounts 2020-2021. And I call on Mr. Ben Smith, Section 151 Officer, please. Ben.
Thank you, presiding member. The report before you has one recommendation when it comes to seeking to move the recommendation, and the recommendation will be after the technical advice I've given you and any discussion and questions and debate thereafter. You are only expected to be lay people on this matter, as has already been touched upon, and so to some extent it's the technical advice I give you to assure you on the matters you've already had from the external auditor and my own view of the year. I do accept electronic reviews of documents are never easy at the best of times, let alone something as dry and boring as a 200-page statement of accounts. But the starting position for me is the format is broadly the same as last year, with what I'm going to say are some COVID special declarations. I must pay tribute to the efforts of all my finance staff and a number of colleagues across the authority who've worked in the most trying of circumstances and still produced an overall document, bar that one qualification, technical matter. The quality and timeliness remains unsurpassed. It's another top-notch effort, even despite that disappointing comment from the external auditor, and we've talked enough about that. In terms of the key messages, I'm going to absolutely canter through. I do not expect you to particularly follow at pace what I'm saying in terms of drawing your attention to the main items, but I won't spend the 2 hours I did spend in the session at Audit Committee with Mr. Garcia. So it's just to draw your attention to the main items and then give you an opportunity to ask questions if there are further questions. As I canter through, I'll be using the convention referencing the council page number rather than the statement of account page numbers. And so without further ado, I'll go as fast as I can to make a decent effort to draw your attention to the main items without overly prolonging the debate. Page 42 sets out the narrative report in normal format that you receive, albeit substantially flexed by nearly £200 million as a result of the COVID impact. And the most important reference in that page, as the leader has already referred to, is over £50 million added to usable reserves. Page 44 sets out the sheer scale of the COVID flex, nearly 200 million quid. Page 46 summarises the capital programme on a single page, same format as usual, largest ever, over £200 million, what we spent it on and how we financed it. Page 49 sets out that there are a range of COVID and financial uncertainties in the current year. They won't be as extreme, I hope, as last year, but there will continue to be uncertainties going through. Page 68 draws your attention to substantial surplus sums of money and the adds to those earmarked reserves in the movement statement. Page 72 is the one that is the thorny one this year. I mean, normally we talk about the usable reserves and that very significant add. Many of you will recall me in council chamber making reference to the usable reserves being my jam jars. The unusable reserves are the jam jars with padlocks on under a lake of lava in deep outer space. They are entirely theoretical, but as Mr. Garcia rightly says, I am obliged to account for them appropriately. Now, the interesting one is that under the Accounting Code of Practice, I could have just put a single entry on the balance sheet and the movement of reserve statement for unusable reserves. But because of the size of the underlying entries, I'm still obliged to put in the notes, which rather cause some of our difficulty in not having a more elegant workaround solution. Because what normally happens on these major items is Mr. Garcia and I and his colleagues have a debate because it's as much art as science, some of these entries, and we normally agree a position. We were just out of time on, as Councillor Phillips has indicated, it's £1 billion, 1% out, it's 10 million, it's over the level of materiality before you've even started. Page 75 sets out the cash flow position. It will come as no surprise I came into the COVID year cash rich, and I added to cash overall, which, as Mr. Garcia has referred to, helps explain why they're satisfied with our overall financial resilience. Page 110 indicates in the income and expenditure analysis the ups and downs as a result of COVID, and you can see it very substantially affected by the large amount of grants that flowed through. Page 138 again references the unusable reserves, which are normally very, very boring, but I think you've got my my anecdote in terms of the technical nature of what can or can't be done with it. Mr. Garcia has made that very, very clear. Page 153 and 154 show huge increases in the length of the list of those grants. That's all of those grants that flowed in at very short notice. Some of them were acting as principal, some as agent. And that's why you've heard from Mr. Garcia why there were some tweaks in terms of what are called the sort of technical adjustments that we were misstated and corrected. Page 160 draws attention to the very substantial sums we've had in cash for the first time in 2021 around the city deal. Having talked about it for a number of years, it was particularly pleasing to get 3 years worth of catch-up money, and I look forward to getting accelerations in due course because both the UK government and Welsh government committed to accelerate funding forward on that. You'll be very much aware from the debates we've had in council that early doors, most of the heavy lifting has been done by the council, and it's pleasing to see some of those sums now flowing through. Page 162 to 165 are what I would refer to as the COVID specials in terms of a whole raft of declarations. And as Mr. Garcia has indicated, the sort of items I've disclosed are not surprising. They're the sorts of things they would expect a Section 151 officer to put in. The world's most unusual year set of accounts that every local authority treasurer is having to deal with. Similarly, page 176 sets out some potential liabilities. And again, contingent liabilities, and again, it's no surprise that COVID features heavily there. Page 180 summarises the council tax losses as were reported at outturn, and they will continue to probably be problematical given people's financial circumstances. That's the sort of general fund as a whole. The pension fund accounts are reported separately. We are one of 11 authorities that's got an HRA account, and on page 187 and 188, I do make passing reference here to the housing revenue account, and it's a tidy surplus. Rents held up relatively well. It's important because of the ring-fence nature of the HRA that I draw your attention to the sums that are in there, but reserves have been added to there. So you've got a raft of entries where you've seen usable reserves rise very significantly, schools reserves rise very significantly, housing revenue account reserves rise proportionately significantly. Every usable reserve cash backed has risen significantly. Unusable reserves have actually reduced. But there is that ongoing issue around that sort of technical nature of what can and can't be done about it. I do look forward to working with Mr. Garcia and his colleagues to try and get to an agreed sum, because clearly I do not want a repeat of the qualification, no matter how technical it is. I will, again, not trying to denigrate, and I do respect the opinion of the Auditor General, but I will repeat what I said at Audit Committee in terms of what does it mean? I mean, the sums aren't quite the same level because this is £1 billion, but it's like arguing over a £20 spend. Is it better to do it as 20 quid or 2 tenors? It's as, you know, it's that sort of thing. And these are very abstract in terms of technical matters. It's also a bit like two aging astronomers arguing whether it's better to go left or right to Proxima Centauri. And actually no one cares because it's hypothetical, because it takes you 73,000 years to get there. And for those of you that are students of political and economic history, the alternative is, I could say, the debate between which is in each reserve is a bit Schleswig-Holstein question, isn't it? And I'm definitely not a prince. I'm definitely not Lord Palmerston. That only allows me to be mad, unfortunately. But it's one of those debates over what it should be. And it's not meant to denigrate what is important. Professionally, it's embarrassing for me to not to be able to fully comply with the accounting code of practice. But I think we've had more than enough examples and anecdotes of why, in one sense, it doesn't matter. But it does matter to ensure that I get an agreed position in future years with the Auditor General. As I've already indicated, I've drafted the letter of representation. It is my intention, subject to any questions you have and any other further political debate, that I will make arrangements for electronic signatures on all of it and send the bits over in due course to Mr. Garcia on behalf of the Auditor General. I will pause there, more than happy to take comments and questions. I do appreciate that is a very fast canter through, but it gives you a flavour overall of why it was the same as last year, but also massively different for the couple of £100 million worth of COVID. As I say, I will pause there and hand back to you, presiding member. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you, Ben. Right, technical questions then to Mr. Smith, Councillor Chris Holly.
Thank you, presiding member. I just want to congratulate Mr. Ben Smith and his staff on this particular statement of accounts. It's been done very, very quickly and very, very well. Just it's a congratulations, and also the surplus, which I understand is the same in many authorities throughout Wales. But anyway, congratulations to you and your staff, Ben.
Thank you. Are there any other technical questions before I call the leader? No one indicating then. The leader, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I'll obviously repeat my thanks to Mr. Smith and the recognition for the work that he and his team have done again. And it really is a fantastic effort, as you can see in the paperwork before you. I would also go on to say, I mean, look, in terms of what has been referenced here, I think we should not lose sight of the real stuff. Let's put it that way, because Mr. Smith, in terms of providing the statement of accounts to us, has been able to demonstrate an increase in the general reserves, which was one of the requests that the auditors made previously. So that's been done. In terms of the earmarked reserves, obviously, there's a significant increase there. And that is something that we should welcome. But of course, we're not just going to put money aside not to use it. It's there for a purpose. That's what earmarked reserves are. So one of those purposes is, of course, the recovery fund. We're the only council in Wales to do something of that scale. That is now starting to flow out to help thousands of businesses across Swansea recover from the pandemic in terms of grants that we're making to them. Obviously, local members have put forward their requests to the recovery fund, which are being considered at the present time in terms of local priorities. You'll have seen things like the 30-odd park and play areas being upgraded, reduction and removal of fees to use parks, assistance for the bus promotions that we've been able to run through the summer, and a host of other things, all made possible because of the financial situation that we have been able to achieve. And of course, on top of that, I know there's been debate around the affordability of the large major schemes and the city deal. And again, as Mr. Smith makes clear in the papers, not only now do we have a capital equalisation reserve able to cover us for the next 4 or 5 years, which was the intention, but actually it'll potentially cover us towards the end of the decade. Again, making sure that we can make the repayments on the investments that we're making, not just in the city centre, but in our schools and other assets across the city. So a very, very healthy position. I think, as has been referenced, that is something that you will see across Wales this year because of the amount of grants that came late. And again, you know, our schools are in a similar position to the council in that they received money late. And again, I know our schools will be doing what they can to ensure that there's a sensible reduction in those reserves over the coming year, and that the money meets the children and the pupils that require it. But again, just I think an excellent position for us to be in. It's certainly something that we should be very pleased about, and we should be very grateful to Mr. Smith and his team in terms of an achievement of this year's accounts. So thank you, Chair, and I formally move the accounts as indicated by Mr. Smith earlier.
Thank you, Leader. There is no one indicating they wish to speak. That being the case, can I thank Mr. Garcia and Ben Smith for the handling of the both statement of accounts and the audit of accounts report. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We now need to vote on the recommendation on page 33 of the agenda, and that is that the council approves the 2020/2021 statement of accounts attached at Appendix A. Mr. Evans?
Needs a second.
Sorry?
Needs a second.
Okay, do we have a seconder, please, for that?
Second.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, the vote has been launched. I'll give it a few moments for it to wing its way across to you, and we do the usual approach.
Done it.
Okay, if you don't see the vote and you wish to vote, you need to vote verbally. I'll take your vote. So Councillor Gordon Walker.
Go.
Anybody else?
Yes, Councillor Mike Lewis. I couldn't get the vote this time.
Okay, and how are you voting, Mike?
For.
4. Anybody else? Councillor Fiona Gordon?
Yeah, 4, please.
Any others? Just
Ryland Doyle Hugh, 4.
Rachel's daughter Ashley hears about it. She immediately offers to come and stay with her mother. She doesn't want me to. She didn't want me
Hello?
to put in that position. She
Ventriloquist.
it was her. It's March 14, 2010.
Hello?
Rachel's on the
Hello?
phone with her sister when she sees someone.
Presiding officer,
Hello, speaking.
it's Councillor Tanner. I want to vote for.
Thank you, Gloria. Councillor Hazel Morris.
Hazel Morris.
Unmute, Hazel.
4, please.
Okay, and I think I saw Councillor Gareth Sullivan's hand go up as well. No, I didn't. Okay, so just those 6 votes. Nobody else. Councillor Sullivan, you managed to vote, did you?
You're on mute, Gareth.
Yes, I voted on the automatic voting panel. Yes.
Were you able to vote? I saw your hand was raised earlier. Okay, fair enough. I'll close the poll then. And again, that's a unanimous vote for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, item 10 then on the agenda is scrutiny annual report 2020-2021 and Councillor Peter Black. Please take us the report, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through the report in detail because it's there for everyone to read. Just to say briefly that you'll notice that the activity is down in this year, largely due to the pandemic, and it has taken us some time to re-establish meetings on the basis it was before the COVID hit us. But we are doing our best to try to continue that scrutiny and to widen out the scope of our scrutiny, and hopefully that will be reflected in future annual reports. But the report is there for you to look to read and consider, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Peter. No questions. Thank all members of scrutiny for their work during the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes us item 11 then is councillors' questions, beginning on page 277. The first question, if there are any supplementaries, Councillor Chris Holly. Chris.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just a bit of a, before the actual question, I want to actually clear up a couple of things here, because when the Velindre works closed, the site was given to Flew Valley Council, obviously, and then when we merged with them to form the City and County of Swansea, the WDA bought the Greenfield site alongside the Brownfield site where the works were, making a total of 750 acres. When I asked the question, I see there's 106 acres that has been developed. I understand that the other 500 acres or so are no longer part of the business park, or possibly even not part of the Take Any law, and have been put into the LDP for housing. Can I ask, when was this decision made and why was it made? The reasons behind this is that there's been 2 large developments, industrial developments and factory developments in Wales in the last few years. One of them was the Aston Martin site which was in the Vale of Glamorgan, which we were told that wouldn't fit onto the Velindre site, yet it would have fitted on if it was 750 acres, which it was when the WDA came into partnership with Swansea City Council, and also the development at up in the valleys where a bottling plant was opened in Ebervale, and that, again, we were told it wouldn't fit onto the Velindre site. So the question must be raised. Why was the site reduced in size from the 750 acres? Why was 600? And why then only left with this 106 acres? Now, we've recently heard that in North Wales, a development site has been sold by the Welsh Government because there was no activity on that site for industrial development. And the reason I'm asking this question is because of that. Have we done, or has someone done the same to us in the Welsh Government or wherever, and removed them 600 acres?
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether you can answer that at this moment. Cabinet Member for Investment, Region and Tourism, Councillor Robert Francis Davis.
So that I don't give a wrong answer to this, because it is quite an involved question there. If I had in writing previously, I could have given them the full answer now, but I will give a written reply.
That's perfectly acceptable. Presiding Member, I'm sorry that I didn't give it to you in writing beforehand, but my research has only just been finished, and I think it's important that when you ask this type of question, you do your research. But I'm more than happy to receive a written answer, and I think that all the members should have a copy of it as well. Thank you.
Of course, all members get a copy of the written answers that are given. Okay, question 2. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a bit of a problem. I have lost the connection to the agenda item, so I can't see the reply on my screen. I've made a few notes, so I'm hoping I'm going to get things correct.
You're on agenda item 11.
Sorry?
2. Agenda item 11.
No, I can't. I have simply got on my screen, this site can't be reached. So I can't see anything for some reason. But anyway, from what I recall, it seems that what is being said is that these days it is parents' preferential choice that seems to take priority over catchment places being available for those children, say within an area like Pentlegare. Is that the case? Have I got the right understanding of what the current situation is? And on the basis that I have, could the Cabinet Member just say whether or not that the way things operate now, and I'm sorry to be a bit parochial, but in terms of my ward and Pentlegare Primary School, there are 74 children attending Pontlw Primary School. Now, some may be there by parental choice, but others are there because there is no room in the catchment school. Now, where I have concerns, there are a number of concerns, but we are supposed to be reducing our carbon footprint. We are supposed to be encouraging parents to walk their children to school. Well, when the children cannot attend the nearest school, and in the case in my ward, they have to be taken to Pontlw or possibly Gosainen, then they're going to be taken by car. So I'm just wondering if the Cabinet Member could sort of comment on this and how he thinks we can improve on the situation so that children living in Pentlegare, in Pontlw, in Pontydalys can go to their local primary school if that is what their parents wish. I know there are huge issues, but we need to address these problems, I feel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a lengthy supplementary question, Councillor Fitzgerald. That could have been put in the original question. Member for Education.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. And can I thank Councillor Fitzgerald? What the response, the written response gives is the framework within which we work as an authority which is impacted by a range of different factors which are outlined there. I think you raise a valid point in more specifics in your own area. This is a constantly changing situation, and I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss those specific issues. It's not an easy issue to get to grips with. Demand fluctuates, patterns fluctuate, parental demand fluctuates. So I think that's something we need to look at in the round. But I think if we look at some of the issues you've raised specifically in relation to Pentegar and Pontllew, I'd be happy to do that individually.
Thanks very much. I will get in touch with you and see if we can arrange something. It would be very helpful. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And that takes us to question 3. Councillor Linda James.
Yeah, I'm just leaving the meeting now. Can you call me in when this item's over?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Mark.
I've got no supplementary questions.
Sorry, Linda, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chuck back in.
Yeah, he's back in.
Sorry, I've got Councillor Jeff Jones's hand is up. Is that in relation to question 3 or question 4?
No, question 4 actually.
Right, question 4, Councillor Linda James, supplementary?
No, thank you.
No. Jeff?
Thank you. I lost you then. Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you to the Cabinet Member for the reply. The City deal is aimed at invigorating the local economy. Swansea Airport could be an important part of our transportation in the city. Can the Cabinet Member comment on whether the airport was ever discussed as to be part of the City deal?
Thank you, Councillor Robert Francis Davis. Robert?
Not to my knowledge, the City deal was quite extensive over Pembrokeshire, Carmarthen, Eton Talbot and Swansea. This didn't come up without we have a tenant who has the airport, and that tenant, in fact, it's only today, is investing £200,000 on one of the runways over this next year, but not specifically, to my knowledge, on the City deal. The leader might know more.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, leader, Councillor Stewart, perhaps you can help.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. From my recollection, I don't believe the airport was ever a specific project. People must remember that the City deal we signed was signed under the May government, and the conditions laid down for our deal at the time were slightly different to the deals that had gone before. I do know there was an exercise undertaken with all partners in the region to condense the, I think, 24, 25 potential projects that were there at the time into the 11 that were finally submitted. And again, that was done in detailed discussions with UK government and Welsh government in terms of the quantum available to our deal in order to support those projects. But to my knowledge, there was never a specific project about the airport, although transport, of course, was something that was discussed. But of course, at the time when we were discussing transport, specifically things like rail electrification, the UK government were promising to electrify the rails into Swansea at that time, and of course they were then reneged on that promise.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that concludes Councillors' questions. On to item 12 on the agenda, the notice of motion, the MND Charter, and I understand Councillor Sam Pritchard is going to move the notice of motion. Sam?
Yeah, thank you very much, Presiding Member. I'm very pleased to be proposing this motion and bringing it to Council to ask Swansea Council to sign the Motor Neuron Disease Charter. Now, motor neuron disease is a rapidly progressing disease, and it affects the brain and the spinal cord, and it can leave people almost trapped in their own bodies, completely unable to move, to talk, and eventually that leads to people not being able to breathe. And worryingly, at present, there is no cure for this disease. This disease that can affect people from all communities or walks of life or backgrounds. There's currently no cure available. And so people with motor neuron disease should have the right to be treated as individuals with the utmost respect and the utmost dignity to maximize their quality of life. And that's what this motion is seeking to do. And as the Members' Champion for Young Carers, I want to draw your attention to the particular a section that says that carers of people with motor neuron disease have a right to be valued, respected, listened to, and supported well. And I believe that this is absolutely the right thing for Swansea Council to do. It's absolutely the right thing for Swansea Council to sign and to commit to for all of our citizens in Swansea. However, if I can, presiding member, I just want to say that it is with some sadness that I bring this motion before the council. I bring this motion before the council because of a recent death of a local Swansea resident. And Keith Davis was a lifelong resident of Swansea, and he was a former member of the Mynydd Bowls Club. Now, Keith's family, after his death from motor neuron disease, asked if I would bring forward this motion to council. And Keith was born in 1949 in Manselton. He grew up in Havard. He was a very keen musician, as well as a well-known member of numerous local bands. And he worked for West Glamorgan and then later Neath Talbot County Council for over 20 years as a senior driver, an assistant manager in social service transport. And so Keith Davis knew firsthand the importance of giving disabled people and carers respect and dignity. He lived out in his working days, and Keith's illness was rapid and gradual. First, he lost his ability to sing, then speech became more difficult. He could swallow fewer and fewer foods, and that eventually led to the sapping of his strength. He lost the ability to move his arm, to drive, and then eventually to play the guitar, which he loved. Despite this, he remained his same humorous self, and above all, he had dignity to the end. And I know that diagnosis for motor neuron disease is difficult, and it relies on the deduction of other diseases. And for Keith was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in April 2021, and he passed away in June 2021. And unfortunately, Keith Davis's story is not a unique story. A person's lifetime risk of developing motor neuron disease is up to 1 in 300. And following the death, his family asked us to sign this motion, which has been circulated by the Motor Neuron Disease Association. But this motion is not just for Keith Davis. It's not just for his family. It's not just for those who knew him, but it is for everyone who has ever lost a loved one to this disease. It is for everybody who is suffering with this disease. It's for everybody who is caring for somebody with this disease. Presiding member, I want to say that this is a motion for everyone in Swansea who will contract this disease or who will know somebody who contracts motor neuron disease. Because whoever contracts this disease, I think it is right for us as a council to say that there should be respect and dignity for all of our citizens until the end. And so, presiding member, I want to formally propose this motion and urge all councillors to consider supporting the notice of motion which is before us today.
Thank you, Sam. Call on the leader, Councillor Rob Stewart, to second the motion.
Thank you, Chair. There's very, very little I can add to the very, very powerful speech that Sam has just made. And again, I think we will all feel real sympathy and affection for the principles of this motion. I'm very proud as leader to offer my support and offer to, if it is Council's wish, to sign up to the Charter on behalf of the Council. I am very, very keen that every member of the Chamber does provide their support to help us give our support to anybody who has to deal with this terrible illness. I would say, obviously, members may also be aware that there is work going on at the present time being led by Councillor Louise Gibbard for us to make a major statement later this year in terms of our commitment to human rights. And obviously, the rights that are contained within this charter will fit very much within that declaration we intend to make. So, Chair, very happy to formally second and very, very proud to support this motion.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Chris Holly.
Yeah, thank you, President Member. Can I reinforce what the leader has said and thanks Councillor Sam Pritchard for bringing this notice of motion forward. I know others will have to have things to say as well, but I fully support the notice of motion.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Cheryl Philpott.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam. That was a very passionate speech on behalf, I think, of motor neurone disease and also other degenerative illnesses as well. For me, there were two very poignant paragraphs. The addendum to the notice of motion with what the statements that are made. But there were two paragraphs that stood out for me. Many people with MND die without having the right care, not having a suitable wheelchair, not having had the support to communicate. 1 week waiting for an assessment or a piece of equipment is like a year in most people's lives because they are on an everyday essential to help us live as normal a life as possible and die with dignity. So what I would ask, because we would wholeheartedly support this notice of motion, but please can we make sure that the information is cascaded to the very frontline staff who would be taking those first calls to make sure that those assessments are done in that timely manner and everything else because of the space, because of the shortness of time that people do appreciate. Those that are dealing with the cases, that they do appreciate that it needs to be dealt with very, very quickly and give it that importance. And that's all I would ask, is that we cascade it. Thank you, Chair.
Chair. Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Thanks, Sam, for bringing this really important motion to Council, and you spoke very passionately about somebody who you knew and somebody from Swansea. It's devastating for the individuals, but also for all their families as well. And I think it is very important for everybody to be supporting this motion. Thank you, Sam.
Do we have Councillor Christine Richards? Yes. Christine?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. I was lingering really before I put my hand up to speak. I just wanted to add something else really. I think colleagues have, Sam's speech was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that, Sam. And of course, everybody else's support. And I think what Cheryl has just said about our own organisation getting on the ball about this is something. If we're going to sign up to this charter, we should absolutely put our money where our mouths are. I think there's something else as well to pass up the line maybe to our Welsh Government, and that's about how long it takes to diagnose this terrible, terrible disease. As Sam said, when he was talking about the guy that he knew, Keith, is it, that he was diagnosed in April and he passed away in June. And there are many people who are hanging around waiting for a long, long time to get a diagnosis on motor neuron disease, because, as you say, there's no specific test to be given. It's just exclude everything else, and then it's probably MND. But there's certainly, I think, a piece of work to be done on getting diagnoses done, and we should use our, we should use every trick in the book, if you like, to raise the issue with Welsh Government and our health service to, to really make sure that people are diagnosed as soon as possible. When you're talking about people living the lives they can, give them the best, give them the best chance of planning and living that life while they can.
Thank you, Christine. Right, have I got this right, Cheryl, that you added something to the notice of motion? Can you just clarify that, please?
No, I think, presiding member, I don't think it needs to be added to the motion. I just think it needs to be the information, as Christine said, that we cascade this and make sure that the departments that would have any responsibility towards dealing do understand that, you know, because more often than not, the first time somebody will phone up, it's to an assessment team, and that assessment team member may not be aware of what we've put as a priority. So I think it needs to be disseminated. The information needs to be disseminated all the way through every levels, so that people do understand that we have given this very important disease the importance that we have, so that, you know, it would be it would be awful if we found that, having put this motion forward and all agreed to it, that we then find that somebody has come forward, they tried to get some assistance from us, and then we failed. And that's all I'm saying is we cannot fit. We must give it the gravity of the importance that we're putting towards it today.
Yeah, very important. Thank you, Cheryl. Councillor Stewart, then. Rob?
Yeah, just to say, Chair, very happy to take that as an action for myself and the Chief Executive, and we'll make sure that the information is cascaded to our teams. And just to reassure Councillor Philpott, I mean, one of the things that we're very mindful of is that we do not bring motions to council which are just statements, that they do then require an action plan or follow-on actions to make sure that we actually deliver the things that we then pass as a council. So just to give you that assurance.
Thank you, Rob. Right, Councillor Pritchard, Sam,
Yeah, I've not really got any other closing words, presiding member, other than just to thank everybody, and just to note, presiding member, the cross-party support in the chamber tonight. I think that's incredibly good for such a good and important motion. I think it is important that everybody is supportive, and that seems to be really positive. And I absolutely agree with what both Cheryl, Philpott has said, and the leader as well. And I'll say this: I think the families and those going through motor neuron disease, I think they will certainly hold us to account. But I absolutely agree that this is not just a motion we pass and forget about, but it is something we will hopefully continue to champion as a council. Thank you, presiding member.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Okay, we go to the vote then. Mr. Evans, take the vote, please.
Yes, okay.
Overwhelmingly for, it appears no one has spoken against.
The vote has been launched. I'll give you all a couple of moments, and I'll take the usual approach. I can see. Councillor Gordon Walker, how do you wish to vote?
For.
Any other councillors unable to see the virtual vote? Excellent. I'll give you all a few moments. Councillor Gareth Sullivan. Councillor Sullivan, how are you voting? Oh. Okay, thank you. Any others? No. I will now just. Councillor Hazel Morris.
I want to vote for, please.
Anyone else unable to vote? Councillor Sullivan, you're raising a hand again?
No.
You okay. Okay, I'll close the vote then. The poll, give me a moment. Okay, that's unanimous vote, presiding member.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans, for that task. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Can I thank you all for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.